Interestingly enough, people think that the system of eugenics, and in particular, the use of needles. Shout out to my brother Dave. Hot Hands is on vacation from LA. A lot of y'all calling in. I see you. Louisville, Kentucky, Senegal. A lot of my international brothers and sisters are in here. San Francisco, you are in here. Stockton, California, you right up the street. Jacksonville, Florida. I see you. I see you. Inglewood, you in here. A lot of people think that Germany learned, or America learned from Nazi Germany when it was the other way around. Nazi Germany learned about many of these tactics of forced sterilization, about ethnic cleansing, meaning if you are not blonde-haired, blue eyes, that you are not the pure race, etc. That did not come from Adolf Hitler, that did not start under the Third Reich in Nazi Germany, that started in America, that was learned behavior from the American Eugenics Society that came under Francis Galton, Sir Francis Galton, founder of the eugenics system. Eugenics comes from two specific words, which means good stock, good genes, good genetics, good birth. That is what eugenics comes from. Sir Francis Galton, I believe it was in 1883 when that term was coined. He inspired a number of other people. You have someone by the name of Madison Grant. Three levels or three classes of Caucasian people. He also talks about people who are undesirables, people who are unworthy of living, people who are feeble-minded, idiots, people who are inherently by nature unintelligent and are better off dead or not being born, period. This system literally is what inspired Adolf Hitler in Nazi Germany. The book, The Passing of the Great Race, written by Madison Grant, is what Adolf Hitler himself stated that it is his, quote, personal Bible, end quote. I want to just lay that as a base so that you can understand where I'm going with this. I'm going to read an article here that was written by sfgate.com, sfgate.com, titled Eugenics and the Nazis, the California Connection. This was written, first published by Edwin Black, November 9th, 2003, updated January 15th, 2012 at 1:11 p.m. It states here, and continue letting me know what city and what state you're checking in from. Also, for those of you who did not know, in chapter 6 of my book, Message to the Millennials, yes, I break down eugenics. I go and refer to eugenics, and I explain and talk about that as a part of the world depopulation agenda. In chapter 6, eugenics, we delve into eugenics in this book. Link in the bio. If you do not have Message to the Millennials, a lot of things that are going on right now are hitting you by surprise, when if you had this book ahead of time, you would not have been surprised at all, because you would have known that it was coming. Link in the bio, RizaIslam.com. Let us go ahead and continue. I'm reading now. Hitler and his henchmen victimized an entire continent and exterminated millions in his quest for a so-called master race. But the concept of white, blonde-haired, blue-eyed master Nordic race didn't originate with Hitler. The idea was created in the United States and cultivated in California decades before Hitler came to power. California eugenicists played an important, although little-known role in the American eugenics movement campaign for ethnic cleansing. Eugenics was the pseudoscience, meaning fake science, aimed at improving the human race. In its extreme racist form, this meant wiping out all human beings deemed unfit, preserving only those who conformed to a Nordic stereotype. We're talking about Sweden. We're talking about different parts of Europe. When you're talking about Nordic, elements of the philosophy were enshrined as national policy by forced sterilization and segregation laws, as well as marriage restrictions enacted in 27 states in 1909. Again, We touch on all of this in Message to the Millennials. Chapter 6, link in the bio, link in the bio, link in the bio. California became the third state to adopt such laws in 1909. Ultimately, eugenics practitioners coercively, meaning forcefully, with fear, sterilized more than 60,000 Americans, barred the marriage of thousands, forcibly segregated thousands into colonies, and persecuted untold numbers in ways we are just learning. Before World War II, nearly half of coercive sterilizations were done in California, where I'm at, where I live, where I'm at, where I live, where I'm from, in California. Wow, nearly 60,000. Man, this is just crazy. Ultimately, eugenics practitioners coercively sterilized some 60,000 Americans, barred the marriage of thousands, forcibly segregated thousands into colonies, and persecuted untold numbers in ways we are just learning. Before World War II, nearly half of coercive sterilizations were done in California, and even after the war, the state accounted for a third of all such surgeries. I'm going to continue reading. Let me check on y'all really quick just to make sure we're okay. So to understand the context here, number one, we're talking about the eugenics movement. We're talking about the connection between America and Nazi Germany. We're talking about the connection between California and the American Eugenics Society. We are talking about who inspired who to do what. Did Adolf Hitler inspire America? Or did America inspire Adolf Hitler? And the latter is correct. America inspired Adolf Hitler to do what he did in certain aspects. It was white people who inspired Adolf Hitler primarily. Madison Grant, Margaret Sanger, who was the founder of what is known now as Planned Parenthood. At the time, it was called the American Birth Control League. We also talk about that. Chapter 6 of this book. Link in the bio, link in the bio, link in the bio. You all should have this book, period. Not just because it's mine, but because the specific information that's in this book, you definitely should have. If it were not my book, I would be promoting it. Not to be funny, but I'm just serious. California was considered an epicenter, meaning the central location of the American eugenics movement. During the 20th century's first decades, California's eugenicists included potent but little known race scientists such as an Army venereal disease specialist, Dr. Paul Popenoe, citrus magnate Paul Gosney, Sacramento banker Charles Goth, as well as members of the California State Board of Charities and Corrections and the University of California Board of Regents. By the way, the audiobook is coming very soon. I'm working on the audiobook. I'll be doing it in my voice, which I know that's what you're supposed to do. I'm going to do my best to do it in my voice. Eugenics would have been so much bizarre parlor talk had it not been for extensive financing by corporate philanthropies, specifically the Carnegie Institute. Now we're going into the international banking families here. The Carnegies helped to sponsor and fund the eugenics movement. The Carnegie Institution. Number 2, the Rockefeller Foundation. Think about this carefully because we're going to go from the past up to the present. The Carnegie Institution, the Rockefeller Foundation, and the Harriman Railroad Fortune. They were all in league with some of America's most respected scientists from such prestigious universities as Stanford, Yale, Harvard, and Princeton. These academians espoused race theory and race science, and then fake twisted data to serve eugenics racist aims. So they utilized education. We know they started with science. They started with spirituality, but then they utilized science in that arena. Then they went into psychology in that arena to justify their eugenicidal ways, to justify their racist mentality in the way that they were operating. Then they moved all the way down into the field of education, and they used that to justify what it is that they were doing. Let us go to the next part of this. Stanford president David Starr Jordan came up with the notion of race and blood in the 1902 racial book, Blood of a Nation, in which the university scholar declared that human qualities and conditions such as talent and poverty were passed through blood. Boy, to be so intelligent, these white folks were so stupendously idiotic. Stupendously idiotic. So it's through blood, is it? Okay. I just laugh at how we were able to be overcome by something so primitive. And when I say primitive, I'm talking about that racist, bloodthirsty, that idiotic, asinine mentality that overtook us. See, a devil can fool you if you allow them to. But as Minister Farrakhan said before, he was like, I don't know how something so stupid could ever rule us. But they did at a certain point, but not anymore. In 1904, the Carnegie Institution established a laboratory complex at Cold Spring Harbor on Long Island that stockpiled millions of index cards on ordinary Americans as researchers carefully plotted the removal of families. I want you to pay very close attention to the past and the present and how these correlate and how these relate and how these possibly will repeat. I want to repeat that again so that you can hear and understand, so that you can look at exactly how the past and the present are relating and how the past can possibly repeat itself in the present. In 1904, the Carnegie Institution established a laboratory complex at Cold Spring Harbor on Long Island that stockpiled millions of index cards on ordinary Americans as researchers carefully plotted the removal of families, bloodlines, and whole peoples. Now they dress it up nicely. The removal. Okay, they're talking about murdering people, kidnapping, murdering, dismembering, etc. That's what they were doing. Also, share this out. Share this into your IG story if you don't mind, family. I would appreciate that. It stayed here. From Cold Spring Harbor, eugenics advocates agitated in the legislatures of America, as well as the nation's social service agencies and associations. So people who were a part of the eugenics movement, meaning who wanted to get rid of black and brown, anyone else who they felt was not blonde-haired, blue-eyed, they occupied positions in Congress, they occupied positions as judges and lawyers in the social services, and they worked at everything from post offices. They were in the educational field. They were in the field of medicine. They were doctors. They were nurses. They were in all these areas. And these people were the ones who had the mentality of, these are feeble-minded undesirables, people who are unfit to produce children. We don't want them to continue to perpetuate the genetics of insanity, of bestiality, of idiocy. We don't want them to continue to perpetuate and produce more children that will be a burden on society. This is not what we want. So we are going to prevent them from having children. We should kill them for the betterment of the whole. They use science, they used education, they use religion, they use medicine. Understand where this was going and where it possibly is going. Again, the Harriman Railroad fortune paid local charities such as the New York Bureau of Industries, remember all of these organizations, and immigration, to seek out Jewish, Italian, and other immigrants in New York and other crowded cities and subject them to deportation, confinement, or forced sterilization. Here's where things get even more interesting. The Rockefeller Foundation helped found the German eugenics program. Think about this. And even funded the program that Joseph Mengele worked in before he went to Auschwitz. Auschwitz was, of course, referring to the ovens, one of the locations where they were burning people in Nazi Germany. Much of the spiritual guidance and political agitation for the American eugenics movement came from California's quasi-autonomous eugenics society, such as Pasadena's Human Betterment Foundation, and the California branch of the American Eugenics Society, which coordinated much of their activity with the Eugenics Research Society in Long Island. These organizations, which functioned as part of a closely knit network, published racist eugenic newsletters and pseudo, meaning fake, scientific journals, such as the eugenical news and eugenics. They had newspapers talking about how unwanted we were, and how feeble-minded we were, and how we were not fit to live, and how we were unintelligent, and how we should not be allowed to perpetuate genetics of cowardice and degeneracy. And they even said that our women were just completely prostitutes and sexually loose and whores, and we should absolutely get rid of them totally because they are a burden on society. They are those who are a part of life unworthy of living. Understand, once again, the Eugenics Society started in America, the American Eugenics Society, which then inspired Adolf Hitler later on. Madison Grant, Margaret Sanger, The Passing of the Great Race is the book, for those who are coming in, that we refer to. The Passing of the Great Race is the name of the book that Hitler claimed to be his personal Bible. That was written by Madison Grant. And of course, Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood. It was first called the American Birth Control League. At the time, she was an honorary Klanswoman. She was a eugenicist. She came up with the birth control pill to primarily get rid of Mexican women and black women, primarily. She also stated that, quote, "We do not want word to get out that we are trying to exterminate the Negro population," end quote. She even stated, quote, that we should use the preacher, to gain the attention of the Negro, end quote, etc., etc. This was all from Margaret Sanger. And then, of course, if you watch the interview of her with Mike Wallace, black and white interview, she is possibly one of the most deadly looking embodiments of pure evil that you have ever seen. I mean, it looks like a straight movie, but it's reality. And you see how evil and wicked she is. Next point. Eugenics was born as a scientific curiosity in the Victorian age in 1863. Sir Francis Galton, a cousin to Charles Darwin, theory of evolution. Man came from a single-celled amoeba organism, etc., evolved into monkeys, and from that to the Homo sapiens sapien, and Neanderthal, and the Caucasian, etc. But if that's the case, then why are there still monkeys? And if that's the case, then how can monkeys be connected to this person? And if they really want to look at it, the only person that the monkey is connected to, it's not us, it's literally genetically, according to the rhesus monkey blood, or the Rh factor rhesus genetic or genome, they're actually connected to the Caucasian, and particularly the ape is the closest related animal when it comes to that. When it comes to the Caucasian, is the ape. So if you really want to go there, they are the ones that came from monkeys, not us. Sir Francis Galton, the cousin of Charles Darwin, theorized that if talented people married only other talented people, which, by the way, we are the most talented, but we understand Mr. Drake, or Mr. Galton and Mr. Darwin continue, that if talented people only married other talented people, the result would be measurably better offspring. So if you got two people who are very talented, you get together, you can play basketball, I can, play football, you can sing, I can dance, let's marry each other, we'll have some super talented children. Again, this is covered chapter 6. Chapter 6. Link in the bio. You should have had this book a long time ago. If you do not have it, I recommend you get it now. Chapter 6. Let us continue. At the turn of the last century, Galton's ideas were imported to the United States, just as Gregor Mendel's principles of heredity were rediscovered. Gregor Mendel, he is the originator of what is called Mendel's Law, meaning you can get the dominant, or you can get the recessive from the dominant. You cannot get the dominant from the recessive. Dark eyes are dominant. Light eyes are recessive, meaning you can get white from black. You cannot get black from white. That's Mendel's Law, and he is one of the only honest Caucasians who stated that, yes, well, basically, black people did not come from us. We came from them. Mendel's Law. The United States, just as Gregor Mendel's principles of heredity were rediscovered, American eugenics advocates believed with religious fervor, meaning they were very passionate about this, that the same Mendelian concepts determining the color and size of peas, corn, and cattle also govern the social and intellectual character of man. Very interesting. So man is synonymous with corn and peas. We thought you were all intelligent scientists, Mr. Mendel and Mr. Galton, and we thought y'all was smart, Mr. Darwin. In the United States, demographically reeling from immigration upheaval and torn by post-Reconstruction chaos, race conflict was everywhere in the early 20th century. Elitists, utopians, and so-called progressives fused their smoldering race fears and class biases with their desire to make a better world. They reinvented Galton's eugenics into a repressive and racist ideology. The intent to populate the earth with vastly more of their own socioeconomic and biological kind, and less or none of everyone else. The superior species the eugenics movement sought was populated not merely by tall, strong, talented people. Eugenicists craved blonde, blue-eyed, Nordic types in Europe, again, Sweden and other areas in that location. This group alone, they believed, was fit to inherit the earth. In the process, the movement intended to subtract emancipated Negroes. Subtract is the word they use. Subtract. Get rid of, kill, take away from the earth. Depopulate. Subtract. Okay. In this movement, they intended to subtract emancipated Negroes, immigrant Asian laborers, Indians, Hispanics, East Europeans, Jews, dark-haired hill folk, poor people, the infirm, and anyone classified outside the gentrified genetic lines drawn up by American raceologists. How? By identifying so-called defective family trees and subjecting them to lifelong segregation. Lifelong segregation. Boy, y'all funny as hell. And sterilization programs to kill their bloodlines. The grand plan was to literally wipe away the reproductive capability of those deemed weak and inferior, the so-called unfit. The eugenicists hoped to neutralize the viability of 10% of the population at a sweep until none were left except for themselves. 18 solutions were explored in a Carnegie-supported 1911 preliminary report of the Committee of the Eugenics Section of the American Breeders Association to study and to report on the best practical means for cutting off the defective germ plasm in the human population. Damn, we are a germ plasm in the human population. You called us a damn germ. Yet that's actually your title, but we're the germ. Interesting. See, if we were the germ, then the planet wouldn't be so focused on getting rid of someone in particularly. We can go outside without getting burned up, but that lets you know. That lets you know. When nature itself is against you, then that means you yourself are not a part of nature. So therefore, you have to humble yourself and really think about this. Again, Mr. Galton, Mr. Darwin, Mr. Mendel. These are very interesting people now. This is the mentality. This is the mentality that we were dealing with here. This is why us in this generation would not have lived too long back then, because we would have told them to their damn face, not only are you racist, but you are stupid and idiotic if you think that something as inferior as you would overtake us. Please stop it. Again, this is not racism. This is us responding to racism. So don't get mad if you're watching this video. Can't believe something like that would be able to overtake us. I in no way would be able to just sit there and allow that to happen. They would have to kill me after. I would probably take out a number of them too. Point number 8 was euthanasia. If you don't know what euthanasia is, you might want to check that out. The most commonly suggested method of eugenicide in the United States was a lethal chamber or public, locally operated gas chambers. In 1918, Popenoe, the Army venereal disease specialist during World War I, co-wrote the widely used textbook Applied Eugenics, which argued from a historical point of view. The first method which presents itself is execution. Its value in keeping up the standard of the race should not be underestimated. Applied Eugenics also devoted a chapter to lethal selection, which operated through the destruction of the individual by some adverse feature of the environment, such as excessive cold or bacteria, or by bodily deficiency, aka tossing you in the cold until you died, aka infecting you with a disease until you died. Polio, smallpox, and blankets from General Amherst, who walked up to the Native Americans and said, "Aren't you cold? Don't you need blankets?" etc. Bodily deficiency, meaning starvation, meaning depriving you of water and food and the things you need as a necessity of life and to live. Chapter 6, link in the bio, link in the bio. Many of you who do not know history, many of us who did not know history, really walked around as if racism didn't exist and if nothing like this could exist. You don't know until you research, and the moment you start to understand, the moment you start to really learn, then you will understand deeply exactly what system you're dealing with, and you cannot change the system. That is a definite. Next point. You simply have to separate and establish your own. Good. We're at the 30-minute mark. Perfect. Let me know what city, what state you're checking in from, family. What city, what state you are checking in from. Eugenic breeders. Remember, they were breeding us like dogs, like cows, like cattle. Eugenic breeders believed American society was not ready to implement an organized lethal solution. But many mental institutions, another area that you might want to realize is in this book, because they use the field of mental health to push their racist ideology. Chapter 8 in the book, mental health versus mental illness, fact versus fiction. Mental health versus mental illness, fact versus fiction. It's in the book. Chapter 6. Get the book. Link in the bio. Link in the bio. Telling y'all, it's in the book. I'm trying to tell you. It's in the book. Social media, in the book. Television programming, in the book. Too much is in the book. Get the book. Eugenic breeders believed American society was not ready to implement an organized lethal solution, but many mental institutions and doctors practiced improvised medical lethality and passive euthanasia on their own. One institution in Lincoln, Illinois, fed its incoming patients milk from tubercular cows, believing a eugenically strong individual would be immune. 30 to 40% annual death rates resulted at Lincoln. Some doctors practiced passive eugenicide, one newborn infant at a time. Other doctors at mental institutions engaged in lethal neglect. You see how they try to make it sound so pretty? Lethal neglect, meaning allow the people to starve, allow them to die from thirst and starvation, don't clean them up, allow them to defecate on themselves, etc., poop on themselves, etc., and don't help them. Just chain them to the bed, chain them to the wall, chain them to the gate, and just let them be there until they die. All these different things occurred in Lincoln, Illinois, in the institution. The mental institutions, you need to understand the field of mental health and its history when it comes to the racist connection to the Jim Crow South, the racist connection to the law codes, the racist connection to all of the things dealing with us as a people and how it affects us today, infects us today, and deals with us today. Nonetheless, with eugenicide marginalized, the main solution for eugenicists was the rapid expansion of forced segregation and sterilization, as well as more marriage restrictions. California led the nation. Damn, why I live in California, man? This state is going to get burned. This is why so many fires going on here, because God is like, yeah, I'm getting y'all back for all the crap y'all been doing. California led the nation, performing nearly all sterilization procedures with little or no due process. In its first 25 years of eugenics legislation, which means it was made law to sterilize people, California sterilized 9,782 individuals, mostly women. Many were classified as bad girls, diagnosed as passionate, oversexed, or sexually wayward, meaning you were loose, or you're a prostitute, or you had no morals for yourself. This is what they classified. So because you were sexually loose, they would sterilize you. Interesting. At the Sonoma State Home, some women were sterilized because of what was deemed an abnormally large clitoris or labia. Wow. For those who don't know anatomy, the four primary parts of the vaginal area will be the clitoris, the mons pubis, the labia majora, the labia minora. Large lips, small lips, clitoris, inner, outer, all those areas. Simple anatomy, understand it. But because if you would have a large clitoris or labia, you would be sterilized. Wow, these people were evil, man. Think about Sarah Baartman. It is something that they pointed out about Sarah Baartman was that her clitoris was larger than the average European woman, and they compared her clitoris and her vagina to that of a monkey. Sarah Baartman, the Venus Hottentot, the sister whose gluteus maximus and medius was so big, her butt was so big, they didn't understand it. They toured her around Europe in a circus because she looked like an animal, they said, because her backside was so big. And then these white women started to fashion these metal braces and made them bulbous and protrude out, and they would put dresses over it. And so when they would walk in, be royal with these dresses on to impersonate the large backside that they did not have, because they wanted to impersonate Sarah Baartman. After they toured her around and touched her, and then they infected her and gave her diseases, and she died from diseases at a very young age. Her sister didn't even make it to the age of 30. Sarah Baartman, I just want to put that in there because, again, California used to sterilize black women and Mexican women for many reasons, and including a large clitoris or labia. I just want to make that clear, dealing with anatomy being another reason why they justified sterilizations. In 1933, interestingly enough, the year that Minister Farrakhan was born, May 11th, 1933. In 1933 alone, at least 1,278 coercive sterilizations were performed, 700 on women. The state's two leading sterilization mills in 1933 were Sonoma State Home, with 388 operations, and Patton State Hospital, with 363 operations. Other sterilization centers included Agnews, Mendocino, Napa, Norwalk, which is right over here, Stockton, and Pacific Colony State Hospitals. Even the United States Supreme Court endorsed aspects of eugenics. In its infamous 1927 decision, Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, which was the Buck versus Bell case, I believe. It is better, this is Oliver Wendell Holmes, Supreme Court Justice, quote, "It is better for the world, for all the world, if instead of waiting to execute degenerate offspring for crime, or to let them starve from their imbecility, society can prevent those who are manifestly unfit," meaning from birth you just unfit, from continuing their kind. 3 generations of imbeciles are enough. Damn. So he said, rather than letting them be born and grow up to not contribute to society, not get a job whatsoever, they're just going to be terrible people because we just know this because they were born unfit. Rather than waiting for them to grow into that, let's just prevent these people from being able to have children in the first place. Eugenics, chapter 6, link in the bio, link in the bio, link in the bio. You should have been at this book. If you do not, you need to have it ASAP. Link in the bio. Here's where it gets interesting. This decision opened up the floodgates for thousands to be coercively sterilized or otherwise persecuted as subhuman. Years later, the Nazis at the Nuremberg trials, you need to know what the Nuremberg trials are, N-U-R-E-M-B-E-R-G trials, quoted Holmes, Oliver Wendell Holmes, a Supreme Court Justice, words in their own defense. This is when they were put on trial for what they were doing in Germany. Only after eugenics became entrenched in the United States was the campaign transplanted into Germany, in no small measure through the efforts of California eugenicists who published booklets idolizing sterilization and circulated them to German officials and scientists. Hitler studied American eugenics laws. Now, this is where it gets real heavy, that I need us to all understand. Hitler studied American eugenics laws. He tried to legitimize his anti-Semitism by medicalizing it. And he also hated black folks too, which is why they say 11 people were murdered in Nazi Germany. They say 6 million Jews, 5 million others. This is how they classify it. 5 million others, so nearly half of the people who were murdered are not even important enough to mention by description, a large percentage of the people who were murdered there were black folk in Nazi Germany. So let's get that clear. Hitler studied American eugenics laws. He tried to legitimize his anti-Semitism by medicalizing it and wrapping it in the more palatable pseudo-scientific, fake scientific facade of eugenics. Hitler was able to recruit more followers among reasonable Germans by claiming that science was on his side. Now, wait a minute one time. Aren't they saying today, when it comes to the vaccines, chapter 6, that science is proving that these are required? Science is proving this. Science says this. Science. It's always justified and wrapped and packaged in a scientific medical necessity, scientific educational necessity, scientific social justification to bring about social benefit to help with everyone else. No. It is a part of the same system. The eugenics movement is not dead. It has simply evolved. Always understand that. Germans. Hitler was able to recruit more followers among reasonable Germans by claiming that science was on his side. Hitler's race hatred sprung from, meaning originated from, his own mind. But the intellectual outlines of the eugenics Hitler adopted in 1924 were made in America. So when people got to talk about Hitler, you can't talk about Adolf Hitler without talking about the white folk here in America. Knock it off. They were doing what they were doing to us long before he was doing what he was doing in the early 1920s over there. So they learned all of that horrific, inhumane nonsense from what they were doing to us over here. Make that very clear. There would be no Holocaust of people in Europe if there was not a Holocaust of people in America, and particularly black folk. Always understand that. So if you want to point at one, go to the origin, go to the root of it. During the 1920s, Carnegie Institution eugenics scientists cultivated deep personal and professional relationships with Germany's fascist eugenicists. Now be very mindful to understand this. A large portion of the scientists in Nazi Germany who were a part of the Nazi death camps, who were a part of the systems that were killing these people, then came to America and then became employed at the CIA, then became employed at the FBI, then became employed with the Department of Intelligence, then became employed at the Department of Defense, then became employed into the highest science departments in areas over infectious diseases, in areas over food and agriculture. A lot of the people who were killing people in Nazi Germany as German scientists, German SS members, became employees of the United States government. Please understand that, because many of them in the 60s and 70s and at that time are still, their mentality is what constructed many of the laws, many of the types of culture in the higher levels of science, education, in the higher fields of medicine that we are dealing with today. During the 1920s, again, Carnegie Institution eugenics professional relationships with Germany's fascist eugenicists. In Mein Kampf, which roughly translates to My Struggle. Mein Kampf is the book written by Adolf Hitler. It was his journal, you could say, but it roughly translates to My Struggle. It was banned in America for a very long time. Published in 1924, Hitler quoted American eugenic ideology and openly displayed a thorough knowledge of American eugenics. Quote, this is Hitler talking. State, wrote Hitler, in which at least weak beginnings toward a better conception of immigration are noticeable. Of course, it is not our model, German Republic, but the United States. End quote. Boy, is that why America bows down to Israel so much? Next point. Hitler proudly told his comrades just how closely he followed the progress of the American eugenics movement. Quote, I've studied with great interest end quote. He told a fellow Nazi, quote, the laws of several American states concerning prevention of reproduction by people whose progeny or children or future would, in all probability, be of no value or be injurious to the racial stock, end quote. Hitler was dropping dimes saying, look, America taught me how to be gangster, player. America taught me how to do that. You know, I be doing that with the needles and the gas chambers. America taught me how to do that, man. I learned that from them. Them white folks know how to do it. They know how to kill some folk. All right. Hitler even wrote a fan letter to American eugenics leader Madison Grant, calling his race-based eugenics book, The Passing of the Great Race, his Bible. Whew, goddamn. Boy. Now the American term Nordic was freely exchanged with Germanic or Aryan race science. Here's a fun fact on this. Aryan is named after Bishop Arius. Bishop Arius is one of the bishops who attended the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD. Funny thing is, Bishop Arius was, by all intensive measures, a black man. So while Adolf Hitler and all these crazy as hell, racist as hell Germans and other white folk were praising Bishop Arius and Leek Heil, throwing all this stuff up and race pride and all this nonsense, you following a black man, pimp. Bishop Arius was a black man. So you still following us. It's funny. It was some black. The Arians were the followers of Bishop Arius. Bishop Arius was, he got noticed, or he caught notice that he was going to be assassinated when Nicaea or Constantine was trying to convert all of them to the idea of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, which came from the principles of ancient Kemetic science dealing with Horus and Osiris and dealing with all of that, which was Egyptian mythology. And so Bishop Arius was not in agreement with that. He wasn't cool with that. And he was telling Constantine, nah, that's mythology. That's not something that we can turn into religion. What are you talking about? There's no one son and all this and all that. And so Constantine was going to try to assassinate him. So they left. And the people who followed Bishop Arius they later on became known as the Arians. Fun fact. Okay. So this is really interesting. Now, the American term Nordic was freely exchanged with Germanic or Aryan. Race science, racial purity, and racial dominance became the driving force behind Hitler's Nazism. Nazi eugenics would ultimately dictate who would be persecuted in a Reich-dominated Europe, how people would live, and how they would die. Nazi doctors would become, damn boy, listen to this, Nazi doctors would become the unseen generals in Hitler's war against the Jews and other Europeans deemed inferior. Doctors were graduated and they were promoted to generals in the army. Oh. Boy, if you don't understand that, that's how insane they were about creating this pure race. They were willing to promote you into an entirely different field so that you would be the supervising authority over this. Make sure they kill everybody who is undesirable. If they're dark skinned, if they're not blonde haired, if they're not blue eyed, kill them. But I need a medical justification, which means I need a medical person who understands that science so that they won't question you. But I have to make you the general so that you can direct the army personnel to carry out our genocidal means. Interesting. Let me see where we're at right now. 10 minutes. Let me finish this. Even though y'all still lost. All right, next point. Doctors would create the science, devise the eugenic formulas, and hand select the victims of sterilization, euthanasia, and mass extermination. During the Reich's early years, eugenicists across America would welcome Hitler's plans as the logical fulfillment of their own decades of research and effort. California eugenicists republished Nazi propaganda or news for American consumption. They also arranged for Nazi scientific exhibits, such as an August 1934 display at the LA County Museum for the annual meeting of the American Public Health Association. In 1934, Germany's sterilizations were accelerating beyond 5,000 per month, the California eugenics leader C.M. Goethe, upon returning from Germany, ebulliently bragged to a colleague. Ebulliently means you are so bubbly and happy about this. Ebulliently bragged to a colleague, quote, "You would be interested to know that your work has played a powerful part in shaping the opinions of the group of intellectuals who are behind Hitler in this epic making program. Everywhere I sensed that their opinions have been tremendously stimulated by American thought. I want you, my friend, to carry this thought with you for the rest of your life, that you have really jolted into action a great government of 60 million people." End quote. Damn. So happy to be evil, right? That same year, 10 years after Virginia passed its Sterilization Act, Joseph De Jarnett, superintendent of Virginia's Western State Hospital, observed in the Richmond Times-Dispatch, quote, "The Germans are beating us at our own game." End quote. More than just providing the scientific roadmap, America funded Germany's eugenic institutions. Damn, America. By 1926, Rockefeller had donated some $410,000, almost $4 million in today's money, to hundreds of German researchers. In May of 1926, Rockefeller awarded $250,000 toward the creation of the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute of Psychiatry. Fun fact, Wilhelm is the name of Wilhelm Wundt, German psychiatrist who stated that man is an animal without a soul, and that he can be controlled just like a dog, kind of like Ivan Pavlov, who came up with the operant conditioning, or the stimulus response, by punching holes in, not punching holes, but ringing a bell while also showing an animal food, and it would give him a response. So they determined that you can condition animals, and therefore, since you condition animals, humans are the same as animals because they have no soul, and therefore you can condition humans the same way. Wilhelm Wundt, W-U-N-D-T, I believe. Rockefeller awarded $250,000 towards creation of the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Psychiatry. Among the leading psychiatrists at the German Psychiatric Institute was Ernst Rudin, who became director and eventually an architect of Hitler's systematic medical repression. Ernst Rudin was actually the real one who wanted to depopulate and kill the people like that. Hitler wasn't entirely the one who wanted to kill him like that. Ernst Rudin was the main person who really wanted it to go down like that, and he actually thanked Adolf Hitler for making his 20-year dream become a reality. Another in the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute's complex of eugenics institutions was the Institute of Brain Research. Remember, they always like to play with your brain. Since 1915, it had operated out of a single room. Everything changed when Rockefeller's money arrived in 1929. A grant of $317,000 allowed the Institute to construct a major building and take center stage in German race biology. The Institute received additional grants from the Rockefeller Foundation during the next several years. Leading the Institute once again was Hitler's medical henchman Ernst Rudin. Rudin's organization became a prime director and recipient of the murderous experimentation and research conducted on Jews, Gypsies, and others meaning black folk for the majority. Let's just get it straight, since y'all don't want to even acknowledge us like that. Beginning in 1940, thousands of Germans taken from old age homes, mental institutions, and other custodial facilities were systematically gassed. Between 50,000 and 100,000 were eventually killed. Leon Whitney, executive secretary of the American Eugenics Society, declared Nazism, quote, while we were pussyfooting around, the Germans were calling a spade, end quote. Boy, America, you so evil. You so, oh my man, I'm telling you, this is, are y'all listening? I really hope you're listening. A special recipient of Rockefeller funding was the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Anthropology, Human Heredity, and Eugenics in Berlin for decades. American eugenicists had craved twins. They wanted to find twins. They needed twins, by the way. This is a particular thirst they had, was to find sets of twins to study on. They craved twins to advance their research into heredity. The Institute was now prepared to undertake such research on an unprecedented level. On May 13th, 1932, the Rockefeller Foundation in New York dispatched a radiogram to its Paris office. June meeting executive committee, $9,000 over a 3-year period to KWG Institute Anthropology for research on twins and effects on later generations of substances toxic for germ plasm. At the time of Rockefeller's endowment, Ottmar Freier von Virchow, a hero in American eugenics circles, functioned as a head of the Institute for Anthropology, Human Heredity, and Eugenics. Rockefeller funding of that institute continued both directly and through other research conduits during Virchow's early tenure. In 1935, Virchow left the institute to form a rival eugenics facility in Frankfurt that was much heralded or applauded in the American eugenics press. Research on twins in the Third Reich exploded, backed by government decrees. Virchow wrote in Der Arzt, a eugenics doctor's journal he edited, that Germany's war would yield a, quote, total solution to the Jewish problem. Virchow had a long time, that name is funny, but it's German, long-time assistant. His name was Joseph Mengele. On May 30th, 1943, Mengele arrived at Auschwitz. Virchow notified the German Research Society, quote, my assistant, Dr. Joseph Mengele, medical doctor, PhD, joined me in this branch of research. He is presently employed as a captain, because I'm not going to say that whole German word, captain and camp physician in the Auschwitz concentration camp. Anthropological testing of the most diverse racial groups in this concentration camp is being carried out with permission of the SS Himmler. Mengele began researching and searching the boxcar arrivals for twins. When he found them, he performed beastly experiments, scrupulously wrote up the reports, and sent the paperwork back to Virchow's Institute for evaluation. Often cadavers, bodies, eyes, and other body parts were also dispatched to Berlin's eugenic institutions. Rockefeller executives never knew of Mengele. With few exceptions, the foundation had ceased all eugenics studies in Nazi Germany, occupied Europe, before the war erupted in 1939. But by the time the die had been cast, the talented men Rockefeller and Carnegie financed, the great institutions they helped found, and the science they helped create took on a scientific momentum of their own. After the war, eugenics was declared a crime against humanity. Interesting. An act of genocide. Germans were tried, and they cited California statutes and laws in their defense. They were not successful. They were found guilty. However, Mengele's boss, Virchow, escaped prosecution. Virchow reestablished his connections with California eugenicists who had gone underground and renamed their crusade Human Genetics. Interesting. Don't they have classes like that in school called human genetics? Where did that come from? Typical was an exchange in July 25th, 1946, when Popenoe wrote Virchow, quote, it was indeed a pleasure to hear from you again. I have been very anxious about my colleagues in Germany. I suppose sterilization has been discontinued in Germany, question mark. Popenoe offered tidbits about various American eugenics luminaries, and then sent various eugenics publications. In a separate package, Popenoe sent some cocoa, coffee, and other goodies. That's what you do. You exchange, you kill folk, you set up some policies to kill a wholesale group of people, and then you drink some coffee and eat some chocolate. They were racist as hell. Virchow wrote back, quote, your very friendly letter of 7/25 gave me a great deal of pleasure, and you have my heartfelt thanks for it. The letter builds another bridge between your and my scientific work. I hope that this bridge will never again collapse, but rather make possible valuable mutual enrichment and stimulation. Evil friends to the end. Soon, Virchow again became a respected scientist in Germany and around the world. In 1949, he became a corresponding member of the newly formed American Society of Human Genetics, organized by American eugenicists and Geneticists. In the fall of 1950, the University of Munster offered Virchow a position at its new Institute of Human Genetics, where he later became a dean. In the early and mid 1950s, Virchow became an honorary member of numerous prestigious societies, including the Italian Society of Genetics, the Anthropological Society of Vienna, and the Japanese Society for Human Genetics. Human genetics' genocidal roots in eugenics were ignored by a victorious generation that refused to link itself to the crimes of Nazism, and by succeeding generations that never knew the truth of the years leading up to the war. Now governors of 5 states, including California, have issued public apologies to their citizens, past and present, for sterilization and other abuses spawned by the eugenics movement. Human genetics became an enlightened endeavor in the late 20th century. Hard-working, devoted scientists finally cracked the human code through the Human Genome Project. Now every individual can be biologically identified and classified by trait and ancestry. Yet even now, some leading voices in the genetic world are calling for a cleansing of the unwanted among us and even a master human species. There is understandable wariness about more ordinary forms of abuse. For example, in denying insurance or employment based on genetic tests on October 14th, the United States' first genetic anti-discrimination legislation passed the Senate by unanimous vote. Yet because genetics research is global, no single nation's law can stop the threats. It's in the book.